Hey guys, it's Ben Seung from Australian Strength Performance, and today we will be going through part 2 of the body composition video that we posted up last week. Now, if you have tuned into our body composition video, you would have learned point 1 to point 4 on how to alter and change your body composition. Today's point is about looking at the comparison between males and females and what are the differences in approaching changing their physique. So it's going to be an interesting seminar. Also, we will be delving into a lengthy Q&A where I delve into answering these questions, but also teaching you how to apply the theories that we spoke about more effectively. So make sure you stay tuned and tick these points off. Now, the last point that I'm going to talk about before we open this up is ensure that if you make any sort of changes for your clients or yourself, make more subtle changes for females versus males. So male clients, you can adopt larger changes, whether it's from a caloric reduction, whether it's from weekly nutrition versus cheat meals, workout load or carb modulation. So there's 4 points here, and I'm going to explain it really quickly. Females, you need smaller changes. Males, you need larger changes. So if I need to drop calories, my males, I can drop calories in a larger chunk. Females, I always do it very minutely. Why? Because too much of a change in the nutritional environment can cause the period to stop. Remember, you said your period is actually a thermostat for the body. It regulates how the hormones in your body is. If, for example, something changes in the female's diet, the period will respond to that and it may actually stop or becomes different. It's not regular. And this could be, for example, if I'm training a female client, let's say who's eating fast foods all the time, and she came to me and, my goal is to change her nutrition. And I started to give her, lots of vegetables, good amount of protein, and just making sure that she's taking some great carbs, some good fats, change the diet to what we call a clean and nutritious diet. What do you think will happen to her period immediately? You might go, oh, this is good, right? You're changing her diet, so things are going to look better within her body and how she responds to it. Well, that may not be the case, because if her body has accustomed or adapted to the bad diet that she was eating, then if I'm starting to change something all of a sudden, even though it's changing it for the better, the body may adapt and react to that very negatively. So the period may stop immediately. So even though my intention for the female client is a good intention, my application and putting it too fast can actually affect the period, and I don't want to do that. So remember, if you're reducing calories, reduce it in a smaller or more minute amount for females. For males, you can have a larger caloric reduction. That's okay, right? Females are more sensitive to that. Weekly nutrition versus cheat meals. So that means if my males are going on a cheat meal in the weekend, they are better adapted to having crazy or bigger cheat meals. So this is where you can go for what we call an epic cheat meal. Go, eat whatever you want to eat. Now, the males will benefit more from having epic cheat meals as opposed to a female. A female will tend to store more fat, and her body does better if she doesn't go as crazy on that cheat meal. So with my female clients, I tend to work out cheat meals in advance to know exactly what they're eating, how they're eating, and we agree on it, and they go and do what they need to do. Whereas for my males, I typically allow them to go out there and have what they feel like eating. So the change can be larger with males and less with females, because females don't react as well. Their body tends to hold on more fat. In the same way that if I'm going to keep their macronutrients, I cannot change their macronutrients too drastically. I cannot kind of drop fats all of a sudden or increase carbs all of a sudden, because if I do that, they don't react to that sudden change. So any sort of their nutrition to their cheat meal, it's not as much of a big change as opposed to a male who can have a standard nutrition through the week and have a massive cheat meal, right? That their body reacts better. Workout load is exactly the same as well. I can increase the workout load more on my males, less on my females. Okay, so learn how to modulate that. Carb modulation, same thing. If I were to play around with carbs, my point down here being females will need to understand that the proportion of carbohydrates taken through the month has to correlate with the period. Typically, I will give them more carbs around the cycle, whether it's PMS leading to the cycle, as well as the first few days of the cycle itself. And this helps them in numerous ways. For one, it actually lowers the stress levels in their body. It decreases their carb cravings because carb cravings tend to be quite intense for most females over that period of time. And what it also does is that it helps them to decide or think better on choices to do with sugar. So if I don't convince them that they need carbohydrates, a lot of females will try to stay away from carbs throughout that whole month, thinking that they should behave like a male, for example, that, because males don't have a period, they're able to stick to a particular nutrition plan throughout, right? Females would have that sudden urge of sugar cravings that hit them at the PMS. And this is where, if you increase the carbohydrates, you actually placate or suppress that craving. They crave carbs a lot less. And as a result of that, because they crave carbs a lot less, their action towards eating sugars is a lot better. That means they don't rush or think that they need to go into the fridge to start taking in sugars. Most females, if they stop themselves from eating carbs, this is exactly what they'll do. They'll open the fridge, and if they reach in to grab some sort of sugar or chocolate, it is one bite that leads them to finishing the entire block. Okay, so it becomes very severe. And that pretty much happens all the time, because the moment you touch sugar, the body doesn't control itself. From a hormonal basis, it wants to placate that cortisol. So it takes in whatever it can to try to offset that. So you got to be understanding that females will need more modulation or changing of carbs throughout the month based on the severity of the period. And so these are the points that you guys need to consider when it comes to body composition, because some of these points relate directly to how the body behaves. Some of these points are more sustainable or long-term strategies that will work around how the body will act based on its relationship with food. So these 5 points, hope it makes sense to you guys. Okay, so great. Now we've got a question here from Anka. Will a low-fat diet reduce production of pregnenolone since it's made from fats and cholesterol? Yes, it will. So pregnenolone is also affected by the amount of fats that you take in. Pregnenolone is actually a molecule or a chemical that is made from cholesterol. So we always talk about how cholesterol is negative, it's bad. Our body needs cholesterol. Our body definitely can manufacture cholesterol from the foods that we take in. However, sometimes when your body is deprived of fats, for example, the stress on your body to create cholesterol becomes a lot more. So this is increasing stress in your body. That's exactly why we do need to introduce saturated and unsaturated fats into your diet. Cholesterol then will be important as a precursor to pregnenolone, and pregnenolone then makes you a sex hormone. So if you don't have enough fat, you actually reduce your testosterone and estrogen. You also reduce your cortisol, which may not be a good thing. All right, because if you got lower stress levels per se, your cortisol is a hormone that is used to wake you up in the morning. So if there is light that shines in your skin, your photoreceptors start to secrete cortisol. This is what kind of wakes you up. It gives you the drive throughout the day. It gives you the drive for your workouts and so forth. So if you don't have enough cortisol, that becomes a negative thing. Any other questions that you guys would have?
Would you prefer we ask in audio instead of typing out? Takes a
You
while to
can.
type it out.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. You can ask an audio, not a problem.
Okay, Ben. So the concept of like bulking and cutting among the so-called gym bros, what is your opinion on that? Because obviously some of them are not really healthy. Like they eat a lot of junk to grow big, and then they suddenly cut a lot of calories to stay lean. down to
Mhm.
the sub 10%. So what is your opinion on that about that?
I'm going to refer back to the slide on body fat percentage that I put up just now, right? And so this is a great question, and most people are still stuck in that ideology of bulking and cutting. But if you look at how bodybuilding has evolved, a lot of the bulking and cutting was done in the early 1990s to 2000s, in that sort of an era. You see people like Lee Priest, you see people where in the off season they will be eating a whole bunch of crap, and then they would lean out for their competition. But bear in mind as well, the amount of steroids, for example, used at that period of time, and the types of steroids are very different from what is being used now. Okay, back at that time, they were experimenting with a whole range of other drugs that is actually kind of banned in the bodybuilding world now. A lot of bodybuilders now, when they go into this bulking phase, they're a lot smarter. So you see a lot of them will maintain a certain amount of leanness because they realize that bulking and eating all this sort of crap doesn't do the gut any good. In fact, what it typically does is it gives them such a big gut, which they already have based on the amount of foods that they take in, that it becomes very hard for them to maintain or to keep that ideal shape that Arnold Schwarzenegger wants them to keep on stage. So a lot of them right now try to keep cleaner diets. They are leaner in the off season. What we know from a scientific point of view or research point of view is that the leaner the person is, or a certain amount of leanness per se, allows you to manipulate the nutrients that you take in better. So based on the slide that I put on just now, we were talking that an ideal sort of body fat percentage for a male between 12 and 15% is going to be great for them to put on more muscle despite the calories that comes in. So if my clients at 12 to 15% and they tell me, oh, look, I want to put on muscle, I can give them a bulk. That means I increase their calories and continue to increase their calories until they tip that 15% point. Once they tip that 15%, I stop them and I pull them backwards to lean them out first. So in order for my client to put on muscle, there will be a continual period of increasing calories up to a particular point based on body composition, then drop them again, lean them out a little bit more, and then I can increase it again. And in that process of doing that, they will be effective in putting on muscle and storing a lot less fat. The moment they cross that body fat percentage, this is where they start to store a lot more unnecessary fat. Will they put on muscle? Yes, but to a smaller degree, they store a lot more fat. So this is where the people who bulk, for example, will say, I'm bulking. Yeah, sure, you get to 100 kilos, but you're standing on stage at 75 kilos. That's 25 kilos of crap that is unnecessary. I'd rather bulk you up to 80, 82, 83 kilos. And if you stand on stage at 72 kilos, I've done a pretty good job. So the less the final stage of the change between their bulk phase and their lean phase, if I can get, maybe an 8 to 10 kilo difference, I'm doing okay. If I get a lot more than that, that's completely unnecessary. But bear in mind, the percentages that I've also given you are percentages that tend to be related with a natural athlete. Now, if you are using enhanced substances, then it's also a different ball game.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep, cool. Got another question here. Is this, if a female doesn't have a sudden sugar craving throughout the month, does that mean that she doesn't need to take in as much carbs? Correct. Correct. Because if a female doesn't have a sudden sugar craving, then there is, I mean, if let's say she doesn't have a sudden sugar craving, she could already be on an ideal amount of carbs most of the time, or her body has adapted to the nutrients that she's taking in. But most of the time, they would have that sudden sugar craving. It could also due to the fact that her hormones are more balanced and she doesn't have a large sort of irregularity with her PMS or her menstrual cycle itself. So females who tend to crave a lot of carbs will tend to have more severe cycles, more severe periods. You'll find that maybe heavy bleeding, more bloating, more water retention. Their sleep tends to be more affected. This all correlates with the yearning for more carbs. Those that don't crave a lot of carbs don't tend to have very heavy periods. A question here from Noel. How would you fix a female client if she made too many changes to diet and the period has stopped? My question here is, how long has her period stopped for? If a period has stopped for over 3 months, in fact, if a period has stopped for a year, then there are a few things that you need to look at. The first thing is understanding how many calories she's putting into her body. Oh, okay. So here's just a delayed 1 to 2 weeks, not really stop. That's fine. I'll get her to eat as she has previously. Yeah, exactly that. But you want to understand as well, if there are things to change in her diet, make those changes minutely. The first change that I would make to a female majority of the time, it's not about caloric change, because often the body reacts to caloric change. It may be a macronutrient change, which means I substitute one thing for another. If I took out some carbs, I will put in some protein to make sure her caloric count is still up there, because the body will be using and burning more. So that makes more sense for a female, and the changes have to be a lot smaller. All right. Typically, fat is also not what I would get them to drop, because females tend to be very sensitive to decreasing fat in their diet. If they drop fat, that would also affect their period quite significantly. So if a female suddenly changed to chicken breasts, brown rice, and broccoli, that's when her period will tend to stop. Guys, if you wanted to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, ask a question. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I have another one with regards to the body fat cells storing more toxins, as you mentioned. So,
Mhm.
if a obese person is going through a progress of fat loss, I believe these toxins will then be released into the blood, and it will take some time for the liver to sort of flush it out, right? So during
Correct.
that time, that person would most likely experience some sort of I don't know, headaches or whatever due to the toxins in the blood.
It potentially could be the case, but also it depends on the rate of fat loss. This is exactly why when you look at the show, let's say The Biggest Loser, there's always a medic on site. There's always an individual down there that is there to, a medic. And the medic often is there not because of any sort of heart issues that the bigger individuals will face. It's because of the fact that they may suffer toxic shock. That means they lose fat too fast, which is what the show is all about, The Biggest Loser. And the amount of toxins that suddenly release could actually affect their organs.
Oh,
So we
okay.
want to make sure that if a fat person loses the fat, that fat loss is being, I guess, slow to an acceptable rate per se. Now, to me, an acceptable rate is roughly about 0.5 to a kilo of weight per week. But it is done in a way that, and some people may lose more weight. Obviously, the fatter the individual, the bigger the individual, the more weight they potentially could lose to start off with. So the rate of fat loss could be quite dramatic. The leaner the individual, the more difficult it is. So we need to make sure that despite the weight loss of the individual, that their nutrition is there to support liver function. And one of the most important things that you need to understand during this phase is protein intake, because protein is a necessity component for phase 2 detoxification of the liver. And during this phase, and a very important source of protein is methionine. And methionine is a sulfur containing amino acid, typically found in meats, organ meats. So if you are on a very low protein diet, you may not be supplying your body with enough methionine for phase 2 detoxification, which could be an issue. So if my client has a lot of weight to lose and my client is vegetarian or say vegan, not so much vegetarian, then I would have to get them to supplement with methionine somehow, whether it's from external supplements. You find a lot less methionine in any sort of plant food.
Right, thanks.
No problem. Another one here from Joseph. What is the adequate protein range for bulking and cutting? Typically, if you're looking at protein itself, it's not so much protein for bulking. People, if you want to bulk, you want to maintain just enough protein for the system. The bulk doesn't come with excess protein, it comes with excess carbs. More carbs, because protein is an expensive nutrient. Protein, if you take too much protein, the body has to use too much energy to break it down as well. So if you're bulking, you want to facilitate the ease of putting on the weight. You don't want your body to work hard to put on the weight per se. So you need to be taking the optimal amount of protein, just enough to help your muscles repair and grow. And then the rest of it is to shuttle as glycogen into the muscle itself. So you would use more carbs than protein. Typically, if you have a large carb intake, let's say you're bulking, then your protein can cruise at about 2.2 grams per kilo of lean muscle mass. All right, 2.2. However, if you're dropping carbs, then what you have to do is you have to increase your protein, because now you're looking at, if you're dropping carbs, the overall caloric count will drop. So you need to increase protein to match the overall caloric count. So the only time where you increase your protein maybe to 3 grams per kilo of lean muscle is when your carb intake is a lot lower. So typically, if you're bulking and you're saying, if I'm bulking and your protein intake is about, your carb intake is about 40% or to 50% of your nutrition, then your protein, you can keep it at roughly 2.2 pounds, 2.2 grams of protein per kilo. Noel is asking, detoxification, what are my thoughts on the use of infrared saunas to help with that? Infrared saunas are very effective, especially for heavy metal detoxification. So if you're storing fat based on heavy metal detoxification, and you want to facilitate a better way of detoxifying heavy metals, then yes, infrared saunas are going to be good. The thing about infrared saunas is this: you got to make sure that you don't overly expose yourself to infrared saunas all of a sudden. So if you've never exposed yourself to infrared saunas before, don't do an all or nothing approach. Try to take it slow. It may be 5 minutes to expose yourself to start off with, and then come out and then wait again. But you need also to fuel your body with certain nutrients. I would look at glycine as one nutrient to add in before you do an infrared sauna. Glycine really helps to support your detoxification system. Glutathione is the other one. And the last one is probably vitamin C. So you need a larger amount of vitamin C. So glycine, glutathione, vitamin C. Infrared sauna, I would start with once a week. You might do that for several weeks and then up it to twice a week if you want to. But the amount of time, you take it slowly. So it's once a week of 5 minutes, maybe then twice a week of 5 minutes. Then you can do twice a week of 10 minutes and so forth, and you build it up. But you have to build it up and titrate it upwards. Next question is, would you gradually reverse diet a chronic under-eating female and be more aggressive with a male in the same position? Typically, from a scientific perspective, yes, that would work better based on what I just said. But I think here we need to also consider the mindset of the individual. If an individual is on a very, very low caloric count, then they're already caught up in that sort of bulimic anorexic cycle. This is where, it's very hard to convince them to aggressively increase their caloric count. Even though their body will need it, their mind would tell their body they cannot do it, because they feel it goes against what they've always thought about, which is to lower their calories and keep a low caloric count. So irregardless, at this point in time, whether it's a female or a male, my goal is to help them with increasing the calories, but I do it very, very gradually, so much so that they don't feel threatened by the increase of calories. Now, the second thing is they need to understand how the increase of calories is going to help them from a goal perspective. So for a female who is going through a really low sort of caloric count, there will be physical repercussions of that. And if they want to be able to either get back their period or help with their skin or hair or complexion, because all that will be affected, then I use the increase of calories as a reason to help those particular goals. And I need to relate it with that. So when they realize that it is to help that those particular goals, they will adhere to the plan, as opposed to saying, oh, you need to eat more because you look too skinny. That those kind of statements won't work for them. You need to relate it to a specific goal that they feel that by not eating enough, it's actually affecting them on a particular level, and they want to overcome that particular illness or ailment or something that's going on within their body. Okay, so relate it to that. Good question. Question here from Lenora. If a female client is already stressed from life, but she wants to train and change for the better, how can we encourage better nutrition for her and not overstress her with training? If a female client is already stressed from life, so any client that is being stressed, the first thing is to, when you address any sort of client, there's so many different factors that you can address. Question here is, she's stressed from life. Well, such a wide statement. What part of life is she stressed from? I don't know your client enough to identify. So your role as a coach would then be to speak to your client to identify the areas that you can. But the key here is this: go for the low-hanging fruit. Which areas can you change very, very simply without causing too much of an issue with your client? Let's say if you want to change the nutrition, right? And you're telling her, oh, you need to do this, you need to buy this, you need to incorporate this in, you need to have another meal in the day, you need to stay off alcohol, you're making all these big changes. That's not low-hanging fruit. That's making an entire change to the universe that she knows as her life right now. A client will not be able to sustain that. This stresses the client out even more. So a small change in whatever the client does could be, let's say, for example, you may not want to make any changes to the nutrition at all. You will not touch a nutrition, but you will tell her this. If, let's say, she's eating whatever she's eating, but you know your client is eating really fast because she's on the computer, she's stressing out, she's eating really fast, she's not considering what she's eating, then maybe teaching her a simple strategy such as moving away from the computer when you're eating and looking outside the window could be low-hanging fruit. In saying so, it's something extremely simple, doesn't involve her changing her food, doesn't involve her changing her routine per se, doesn't involve her changing a lifestyle, going to work out, nothing. It just changes the fact that if she's eating in front of the computer, take the computer, move it away, turn, look in front of the window and eat. And when she does that, she could slow down her eating. When she slows down her eating, that means she has a tendency to eat less. People eat very fast in front of a computer or a television. And when they eat very fast, often the brain doesn't get time to register that they're full. And so they often overeat. So you can drop calories just by putting in a very simple strategy. The question down here is, go for the low-hanging fruit in order to change your client's habits, because when you do that, you will start to see that things will start to move. So don't address the big things first, address the simplest things that you can address. All right? Because Lenora here, you've given me a list of like 6,000 questions. Which one is the easiest? Pick one. The next question here is, will females lean down? Will females who lean down have a smaller chest? Is there a way to prevent this? Will females who lean down have a smaller chest? Majority of the time, yes, because the breast and the bum is the area where the body stores fat. That is the natural area where fat is being stored. So if a female leans down, the body would typically lose from the glutes and will lose from the breast as well. So yes, that will be the case. Is there any way to prevent that? There is a way to prevent sagginess of the breast, and that is not to lose weight too fast. That is to maintain that the nutrition is still healthy and they don't drop below a minimum of 1,200 calories. Because if they do, then the breast is lost rapidly and it becomes really saggy. And this is what I found with a lot of female competitors. So leaning down very, very slowly has a better way of, can you actually change fat loss? No, you can't. But you can make the body look a lot better when it's lean, as opposed to, looking really saggy like a sunken prune. Because often female competitors that do too much cardio, drop their calories too fast, that tends to happen to them. Okay, just answer a couple of questions and then we are done for today. So last two questions down here. Biggest problem my clients are having is the ability to consume enough protein. How can I make changes in their diet plans? So I'm going to mute you, Pat.
Yeah, sorry, I was held up at work.
Okay, I've got to mute you. Sorry. The biggest problem in my clients is having the ability to consume enough protein. How can I make changes in their diet plan for them to be able to eat enough protein? Uh, to be able to consume enough protein is this. Most people don't consume enough protein, not because they don't consciously try to. It's because they feel that too much protein doesn't give them a good feeling. It sits down there. So you find that with a lot of ladies, they don't like protein because it sits down there typically, and they prefer a lot of foods that are lighter per se. So one thing that I would typically do, which is extremely simple, is introduce a digestive enzyme for them. As simple as that. So in their meals, every meal that they have, I will put in a digestive enzyme. This digestive enzyme will tend to contain an enzyme that will break down protein. So you look for a protease, which is extremely important. And typically, I would also put in a HCl or hydrochloric acid with that. So hydrochloric acid with a enzyme spectrum, you can buy that in supplement form, but there are contraindications of introducing a hydrochloric acid, so that this will be something that I may or may not do depending on the circumstances of my client. That means I need to understand whether they've got, stomach ulcers. I need to understand whether they've got been on any sort of pain medication, or the circumstances of their life before I introduce a hydrochloric acid. But an enzyme, for example, is universal. So I will put in an enzyme for them in their protein meals. They will find that with that, they can digest protein a lot better. And then all of a sudden that increases their want to eat more protein. So that's important. All right. So typically that's why people don't have enough protein. Okay. I'm just going to finish off at Angel's question, but I'm going to answer two more and then that's it. So I've got a question here from Drew. If a client is regularly menstruating, but only having menses for a max of 3 days or less, is that considered healthy? It can be. Menses is something that is very individual. So some, females would typically take 4 to 5 days. Some would take 3 days and are very, very light. But if they consistently have it on a regular basis, and this is the pattern that they're showing, it can be completely normal. So if that's regular and that's what she has all the time, I wouldn't worry about it. However, if she constantly has, let's say, 5 days of regular menses, it comes on a particular day, and then all of a sudden it's very light, or it's in the middle of the month, or it's spotting, then that's when I would start to question what is going on. And typically, I'll try to find out, lifestyle-wise, is there anything that's going on within your lifestyle in this month that I need to know? One, are you more stressed at work? Are you overtraining behind my back? So I'm giving you a program, but because you want to speed up fat loss, you've gone to do 5 other sessions of cardio outside. And I can pick that up very easily because, again, the period is a thermostat. So if their period is not regulated, first and foremost, I will start to ask questions. I could also ask questions such as, what are you doing with your food? Are you cutting down calories? Are you trying to be clean and not putting fat into your nutrition? Because if that's the case, that could affect the period as well. Or they are taking out certain calories, certain supplements, or putting in certain supplements that I'm not aware of. So I always use the cycle as an indication or a gauge to what's going on within their lifestyle. And I sometimes will modulate the programs based on that. That means if I give them a program, that program is meant to last them for a certain period of time. However, if, for example, I find out that they're highly stressed and their cycle is not going regular and so forth, I will make changes to the program immediately. I could call them to stop the program for a week. I could decrease the volume. I could, basically give them half the program instead of the full program. Goal there is that I don't want to overwork them because that increases the cortisol within the system. Okay, so I can change things as it is. The last question here from Angel is, she says, I see a lot of ladies nowadays getting shredded by lifting heavy while maintaining calories. So instead of hypertrophy, they focus on strength. They rest for 3 to 4 minutes and lift really, really heavy. They're also advanced lifters. They look amazing in terms of body composition. I've learned with you that hypertrophy is optimal. Will this strength lifting approach help in building muscle, leaning out, and helping PRs? My question is, where are you seeing this, ladies? And what are they eating? So you got to understand, a lot of ladies that lift heavy, they don't do a specific lift heavy program only. People who lift heavy often lift heavy and do accessories. The accessory work can be hypertrophy work. So if you're adding in strength to your hypertrophy programs, that's not a problem. Potentially you would need that. But just by lifting heavy and just doing heavy, you are not going to maintain leanness, because you see a lot of very, very strong power lifters, a lot of them don't do that. A lot of strong women, for example, that lift heavy, specifically just lifting heavy, less accessory work, they are not lean per se. Their body fat is a lot higher. They're damn strong, but their body fat is a lot higher. If you see a female that is lean, they're trying to cross or cross that breed. Either they are competing in a particular competition that is bodybuilding as well. So you see that there are phases of them doing strength, yes, but majority of the work is hypertrophy with strength phases. So can they do strength? Absolutely. But in their entire cycle of, let's say, training for 10 months, they might do 2 months or 2.5 months of strength and the rest of the time hypertrophy. So your body will gravitate towards the thing in. That doesn't mean that if you train hypertrophy, you should trade it for 10 months throughout, because one of the concepts of hypertrophy is the fact that your body adapts, and because it adapts, you definitely need to change things up. Okay, so understand that. Typically when you do heavier weights as well, your caloric count will increase for sure, because you're stressing your nervous system. When your nervous system is stressed, you find that you're more hungry. So try this. Go and do a heavy workout all of a sudden, from a hypertrophy workout to a strength workout. You will find that after you finish a big strength workout, you might lose your appetite immediately, but you go home and you might wait for that night. It may not happen that night, but the next day, your appetite will shoot through the roof. You would feel like you don't understand what's going on. You're eating, craving for carbs. You're eating like a horse, because your body will need that to help recover your system. So caloric count is not essentially maintained. It is increased during strength sessions. It can be maintained during hypertrophy, but strength sessions, it will definitely have to go up. Okay, unless they're on a really high base level of calories. If a female is on a base level of 3,000 calories, they can go for hypertrophy or strength. It doesn't matter, because their caloric count is so high. All right, last question from Pat, saying that you're already taking digestive enzymes. How do I know I need supplements for bloating, gas, etc.? Question is this: if you're already taking digestive enzymes, great, tick there. How do you know if you're bloating? You should know if you're bloating, because if you look at your body and you don't know that you're bloated, well, the first thing to identify is, are you bloated or are you not bloated? Because if you're not bloated, good on you. Remember, supplements are there as an add-on. A lot of people like to try to address a problem that may not be a problem at all. Okay, so I repeat, there's a lot of people like to address a problem that may not be a problem at all. A lot of people will read information about leaky gut and overdiagnose themselves and go, I've got leaky gut, and so I need to address my gut problem. Well, whoever said you got leaky gut? Oh, I'm gluten intolerant, and so I need to stay away from all breads or sugar because that's evil for me. Well, whoever said that? So don't overanalyze your body in the sense that, there's something wrong with you, and that's an issue. And if, for example, you're taking enzymes and you're still bloated after foods, then you need to look at, maybe you need to put in hydrochloric acid, for one. Secondly, the foods that you're taking in could be irritating your gut. So irregardless of whether you're putting in enzymes to help digest foods, if the food contains a protein that irritates your gut, you have a food intolerance. Cut out those foods. And if you can identify if exactly what those foods are, after you eat them and all of a sudden you get really bloated, those are the foods you need to remove from your nutrition straight away. If you know that if you ate in chicken or chicken breast and all of a sudden you are really bloated, take out chicken breast straight away. Remove it for a total of 21 days completely, and then slowly reintroduce it into your diet. When you reintroduce it, you need to understand and observe for any sort of bloating. If there is no bloating, that's fine. You're good to have chicken breast again, but only have it occasionally. Don't put it in every single day. If, for example, there's bloating again, take it off and stay off it for 21 days and redo it again. So you keep doing this over a period of time to see how your body reacts to a particular food. Now, some people will react to chicken breast this way. Some people will react to breads this way. Some people will react to milk this way, whey protein, nuts. These are very common foods that they take in: broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, tomatoes. So all these different fruits and foods have a propensity to irritate your gut. Not everyone is irritated in the same way. So what you can do is start noticing how your body behaves with certain foods. We tend to take for granted how our body behaves, but a good way is to be able to keep a journal. So every food that you take in, start writing a journal to see how your body feels. If you can identify a particular food, then take that food out. Feeling bloated and looking pregnant after a certain meal is actually very common because a lot of us have food intolerances based on what we expose our body to. But we also need to look out for stool health. That means when you go to the toilet, if you constantly have constipation or diarrhea after eating a particular food, that's also what you need to observe and cut out. So those foods are probably not the best for your system.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to our body composition seminar. I hope you've taken away some important and relevant points that you can apply to yourself. Now remember, these are live seminars that are held every month on our online learning platform, learn-asp.com. Now this platform also hosts all our seminars, our courses, and live seminars as such. So make sure you hop onto our online learning platform, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.